Thanks for being with us today. I'm Greg Corombos, news director at the Radio America Network, sitting in for Laura Ingraham today. In my normal job, I host the Three Martini Lunch podcast in conjunction with National Review. My friend Jim Garrity, who's my co-host, will be with me later in the program. I also do a series of interviews each day you can find at dateline.radioamerica.org. Before the break, we were talking about the president's trip to Latin America, and while the trip to Cuba certainly got the most attention, it was his comments down in Argentina late in the week that we've been talking about in the last few weeks. Here's a quick recap of what the president said about the fuzzy differences, apparently, between capitalism and communism.
In the past, there's been a sharp division between left and right, between capitalist and communist or socialist. I think for your generation, you should be practical and just choose from what works. You don't have to worry about whether it neatly fits into socialist theory or capitalist theory. You should just decide what works.
That sounds a little different than the president we had about 30 years ago. President Reagan, pretty clear, very clear, in fact, in a number of ways about what he thought of communism and the ruling communist system at the time, the Soviet Union.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
And just a few years before that, he left no doubt what he thought of the communist system in Russia.
I urge you to beware the temptation of pride, the temptation of blithely declaring yourselves above it all and label both sides equally at fault, to ignore the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire, to simply call the arms race a giant misunderstanding, and thereby remove yourself from the struggle between right and wrong and good and evil.
The Evil Empire speech from 1983. Joining me now to talk about this and all sorts of other political stories developing here as we begin the new week on this Easter Monday is Craig Shirley, acclaimed Reagan biographer, founder and president of Shirley & Bannister Public Affairs. His most recent and third Reagan biography is Last Act, The Final Years and Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan. Craig, welcome to the show again.
Greg, happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you. It's good to have you with us. And I'm sure I'm sure somewhere in those Reagan speeches, we just missed it after he said, tear down this wall. He said, on the other hand, whatever works for you.
Well, yeah, no, he never said that whatsoever. He identified good and evil in the world, and we were good, and the Soviets were evil, communism, socialism, however you label it. He also said we would consign it to the ash bin of history, the ash heap of history. He was right about that. Barack Obama, look, let's face it, is not a very learned man. We've always known that. He's an intuitive politician. That's why he never quotes the framers or the founders. He's never worked in the private sector, so how could he understand the private sector? He thinks that socialism, free market, what difference does it make? As a matter of fact, it makes a great deal of difference. If he looked around in Cuba, he would see that they're still driving cars from 60 years ago. They have no economic progress whatsoever. The average age of the average Cuban is regressing, not progressing. In every way, shape, or form, socialism in Cuba has failed utterly, and that's why it collapsed in the Soviet Union. That's why it collapsed in the Warsaw Pact. That's why it collapsed in the Baltics, because communism doesn't work. As Margaret Thatcher said, eventually you run out of other people's money. Now, there is a great difference between socialism and communism, which led to the conflict between Stalin and Hitler. There are great doctrinal differences. Socialism is, the state controls the means of production and distribution. In communism, the state owns the means of production and distribution. To you or me, it doesn't amount to a tinker's dam, but to socialism and communism, it matters a great deal.
Craig, we're talking about 73,000 victims of communism in Cuba. Obviously, when you look at
millions behind the Iron Curtain.
Sure, China, of course, perhaps the worst killing fields of all. Any of the actual killing fields in Cambodia. So
Cambodia, right.
Probably 100 million at least, if not more.
By Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. And then the American left utterly, completely turned their backs on the Vietnamese boat people. George McGovern, during the Vietnamese, when the people were fleeing the murderous tyranny of Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge in 1975, George McGovern, the famed ultra-leftist senator, failed presidential candidate, sniffed, Asian people should stay in Asia.
Craig, one of my favorite people on the planet, who I won't name, believes that if you don't actually remember the Cold War, you shouldn't probably be able to vote. I think he's kidding. But given the fact that the Soviet Union fell about 25 years ago, and so many people now who are full-grown adults don't remember that era, how much of an impact do you think that has?
Well, I think it has a tremendous impact. Look, American college campuses are no longer factories for knowledge, inquiry. They're factories for the manufacture of ignorance and hatred, which is why you have so many ignorant students being churned out of American college campuses now. They don't know the difference between socialism, communism, or the free market. I mean, to them, you know, it's all just one and the same, and they just buy into the idea, can't we all get along? As long as somebody else pays for it, as long as I get a free education, as long as I get free health care, as long as I get free contraceptives, is that they have been raised in a culture of being pampered and being told that everything that they were ever told about Western civilization is wrong, in the evidence of in the face of all evidence, and everything you're told about the East is right, and that communism is superior to and collectivism are superior to the free market state.
There's obviously always been a socialist streak, or at least in the past several generations in the United States. And Bernie Sanders was an avowed socialist long before he became cool on the left. He was considered this abstract gadfly in the Senate until very recently. And all of a sudden, he's like the darling of not only the young people who are coming out of the college campuses, either still there or recently came out of the college campuses, but he's winning a lot of states. He swept all 3 states over the weekend, Alaska and Hawaii, and he's also got a situation where he's pushing Hillary Clinton further and further to the left, where she kind of isn't embracing the socialist label without actually calling herself that. So what are we seeing on the left?
The fact that Bernie Sanders is getting so much support among young people is an argument for raising the voting age, not lowering it. Is that 18-year-olds just don't know anything. And so it's open to question whether or not, of course, they don't really vote all that much anyway. They vote in smaller percentages. And when they do, they vote for celebrity, not for knowledge and information, which is why they were so turned on by Barack Obama in 2008, because he was a celebrity candidate. As a matter of fact, I've said it before, is that Barack Obama is our first Facebook president. He is skilled in the study of himself. He is not skilled in the study of the world around him, whether it's the Constitution, the history of America, or the history of the world, for that matter.
Right now, if you look at some of the head-to-head matchups, and it varies, of course, from polling firm to polling firm, Bernie Sanders is actually doing better against the 3 remaining Republicans than Hillary Clinton is. Is that simply a factor that she's just very unpopular, or is the desensitization to socialism in a lot of parts of this country almost complete?
I think it's a lot of those things, Greg. Don't forget, is that she's been in the public eye since 1992, so she's had a lot of time to offend a lot of people. And so that speaks of her, plus her ongoing corruption. She's Typhoid Mary when it comes to the corruption of the Clinton administration, her own corruption at the State Department. That's a drag on her. Her own personality is a drag on her. And the fact that the Democratic Party has demonstrably moved to the left is also a drag on her, which explains why Obama can't articulate the difference between socialism, communism, and freedom.
If they've moved so far to the left, and they have, obviously, if Sanders is a viable candidate on some level, and Hillary Clinton is moving left to try and siphon off some votes over there, and she'd probably wear a Che Guevara T-shirt if she thought it would get a few extra votes, maybe even the beret.
Hey, you know what? That's going to come up in the staff meeting tomorrow as a suggestion.
So why are the Republicans having such trouble matching up with both of them? Obviously, you've got Kasich and Cruz that, for the most part, seem to be edging Hillary out while Trump is a little bit behind. And then with Bernie, he's either ahead or tied, I think, with John Kasich. So if the Democrats are moving so far left, why can't the Republicans build up a bigger lead here?
Ronald Reagan left the Republican Party in January of 1989 with a 73-75% approval rating. And unemployment was at 5.1%. Gas prices were falling. Inflation had been eradicated. Interest rates were brought down to supportable levels. The West was finally winning the Cold War as opposed to losing it 8 years earlier. In every demonstrable way, Reagan left America and the world better off. But he also left the Republican Party better off because he gave it a coherent governing philosophy of less government, more freedom, and an optimistic outlook and optimistic belief in the future. Not that the Carter dour look at the future, was a future of scarcity and sacrifice. So, we were the happy-face party. And by the way, happiness is part of an ideology. Is that a belief in the future is part of a philosophy. So, and what does George Bush do? Is that Bush is elected and he immediately rebukes Reaganism with his kinder and gentler blather, breaks his pledge on taxes, leaves the party wrecked and ruined in 1992. So Bill Clinton is elected. The Republican Party stages a comeback by making 1994. Newt Gingrich knew is that if he made it a referendum on Reaganism versus Clintonism, then the Congress would go Republican historically, and he was proven right. It was a referendum on Reaganism. Clintonism was rebuked. The 104th Congress becomes one of the most important productive Congresses in modern American history. Lots of reforms are passed. Welfare reform is passed. Internal reforms are passed. Freedom to farm is passed. Balanced budget, trade agreements, all sorts of things are passed. George Bush is elected in 2000, with the aid of the Supreme Court, and a dubious count in Florida, but he never once calls for the elimination or the spending cut of one federal program. He runs as a quote-unquote compassionate conservative, which, as we know, the noun is the enemy of the verb. And then he proceeds to again wreck the Republican Party again. So we're left with the decima of the Republican Party is that it's been split again because of the Bushes into two warring factions, whereas Reagan left it with a coherent governing philosophy, and that's what's at stake today. Is that you got the insiders arguing for big government republicanism, a phrase that came into popularity under Bush, and the outsiders who believe in reform and federalism and less government and more freedom and let the people decide their own problems and solve their own problems on the other side of the fence. And it's an ongoing fight. And, it won't even be solved by the convention. It probably won't even be solved by the election, even if Republicans win. So the Bushes have left a legacy of defeat and disrepair and separatism in the Republican Party.
It's nice to see that they've at least moved to big government republicanism instead of big government conservatism, which was the fun oxymoron that they had there for a while towards the end of the Bush years.
Which is completely, you're absolutely right. It's an oxymoron. It's a complete contradiction in terms. Is that you cannot be an American conservative and believe in big government.
Amazing. What about the sunshine aspect? Obviously, that was just a natural part of Reagan's disposition, and that, in addition to policies that I think people were ready for after 4 years of Jimmy Carter, appealed, obviously, to a lot of people. He scored a historic defeat of an incumbent president in 1980, which you chronicle so well in Rendezvous with Destiny, your second book on the 1980 election. And where's the sunshine this time? Is it a matter of these candidates, A, trying to defeat each other? Is it a matter of the huge list of problems facing the country, so it's hard to be exhibiting a lot of sunshine at this point, or are they just not naturally wired for that?
I think it's all of the above, Greg. I think one thing, too, is you haven't factored in is the growth of the consulting industry, which has really led so much of the Republican Party to wreck and ruin, is that they are the new party bosses. They're the new gatekeepers, and they are unaccountable to anybody. And that's, can interject anything. A suggestive photo of a candidate's wife sets everybody off into paroxysms of national debate. And it was all done by an unpaid, unasked for minor consultant who put this out there on the internet, and it's led to this renewed, ugly fight inside the Republican Party. These consultants have got to be reined in. They've got to be controlled. They've got to be somehow. I don't believe in regulation, but at least have the free market do disclosures on these people so they know who's good and who's not good. But the party is. I don't know who the sunshine candidate is. That may be that Reagan was simply once in a lifetime, that he was the man of optimism. I do know that he stole it from the Democratic Party because Carter gave it away. The Democratic Party from the time of Franklin Roosevelt, when his campaign theme was, the song Happy Days Are Here Again, to John Kennedy's, we got to get this country moving again, is that the Democratic Party had always been the party of the future until 1980, when Carter turns to the dark side and embraces scarcity and sacrifice, and Reagan says, okay, then I'll be the party of optimism. Is that the Bushes handed that off. I don't know who's going to pick it up now.
Craig, we know what the greatest Easter gift was, obviously. We celebrated that yesterday. I think the second, at least this year, is that we don't have another primary until next week. So,
but there's another town hall coming up, or a debate or something?
Probably.
Yes, right. On the Clinton News Network.
This is the year of the town halls. I think there were a couple maybe 4 years ago, and all of a sudden now there's at least one a week, maybe more. Sometimes even compete with each other. It's amazing.
Yeah, I know. and every time you turn one on, you feel like your IQ is dropping.
Craig, always great to have you. Happy Easter again. We'll talk to you later.
All right, thanks, Greg. Take care.
Craig Shirley is an acclaimed Reagan biographer. His most recent book, released last October, is Last Act, The Final Years and Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan. He is the founder and president of Shirley and Bannister Public Affairs, one of the leading and most influential public affairs firms in the greater Washington, D.C. area. I'm Greg Corombos, news director for Radio America, sitting in for Laura Ingraham.